The hospital was hushed on that particular night. A soft luminescence from the emergency lights shone on the sanitized walls, creating an ambience of tranquility. Nurses and doctors on the night shift engaged in hushed discussions as the sparse sound of footsteps resonated through the deserted corridors. The evening appeared to be routine until the automated main entrance doors parted. Everyone anticipated a patient arriving, but instead, a German shepherd materialized. Its fur was caked with dried mud, its profound eyes mirroring both weariness and determination. This was Max, a former service dog who had once served with distinction in the police force. Max proceeded with caution, yet with a clear sense of purpose, gripping a small bundle in his mouth that was carefully enfolded in an old piece of cloth. The nursing staff traded astonished looks. One of them paused, but ultimately moved forward, her curiosity winning out over apprehension. As the bundle was gently revealed, it felt as if the room had been deprived of oxygen. Inside lay a baby, small, delicate, and gasping for air. Its skin was pallid, its chest heaving erratically. "Oh my God, it's a baby," a nurse whispered, her voice unsteady with shock. In an instant, the quiet of the night was broken as the emergency department erupted into activity. Nurses and doctors rushed into motion, the sound of their scurrying feet echoing down the halls. Equipment was rapidly assembled as the medical team battled to stabilize the delicate infant, each passing second feeling like a pressing countdown. No one in the emergency department could process what they were witnessing. A canine had entered the hospital bearing an infant who was perilously close to death. Max remained motionless, quiet, and composed, betraying no indication of fear or anxiety. His eyes, however, were filled with an urgent appeal for assistance. The nurses and doctors, despite their experience with innumerable emergencies, had never come across a situation quite like this. "Quickly, assess his breathing and heart rate," one of the doctors commanded, jolting everyone into focused action. A different nurse dropped to her knees next to the bundle, her hands shaking as she meticulously unwrapped the fabric. The baby's skin was frosty to the touch, his tiny frame covered in dirt, and his breathing was shallow and erratic. "This child is suffering from severe dehydration and malnutrition," the lead doctor announced gravely. "We need INF4 now. We must stabilize his breathing at once." The heart monitor produced a sluggish, faint beep, underscoring the gravity of the situation. A nurse swiftly attached the baby to an oxygen source, cautiously regulating the flow. Everyone operated in silence, the tension heavy in the room as they fought to save the baby's life. While the medical staff concentrated on the baby, one of the nurses found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Max. The German shepherd stayed near the entrance, unmoving, his eyes locked on the infant as if anticipating a miracle. He did not bark or make a sound. He merely observed, his eyes conveying an intelligence and gravity that seemed nearly human. "This is so strange. How did he know to come to this place with the baby?" the nurse whispered to herself, her face a combination of wonder and disbelief. No one could provide an answer. All they understood was that Max had behaved as though this was the single most critical task he had ever undertaken. The doctors labored without pause. A nurse fine-tuned the infant's oxygen supply, while another monitored his body temperature. "Still weak, but his vital signs are beginning to steady," someone reported in a low voice. The palpable tension in the room lessened somewhat as the baby's state started to show minor improvement. Nevertheless, they were all aware that this was just the start. The child was still in critical condition, yet because of Max, he was now given a chance to fight for his life. Despite his evident exhaustion, Max's gaze never left the infant. The room quieted for a brief, profound moment as the medical personnel fully comprehended the full scope of the remarkable incident that had just occurred. Word of the peculiar event traveled rapidly throughout the hospital. In a matter of minutes, the police were contacted to request their assistance. Officer Daniels, the lead investigator, showed up at the location with his team. As they walked into the emergency room, nurses relayed the unbelievable tale, their expressions still marked by disbelief. "We have no idea where the dog came from," the head nurse clarified, her voice shaking slightly. "He carried the baby inside, set him down on the floor, and simply waited. That's all we know." Officer Daniels squinted his eyes, observing Max positioned near the entrance. A dog carried a baby to the hospital? That's a difficult story to accept, he murmured, although his look softened as he noted Max's composed yet vigilant presence. Did anyone attempt to scan him for a microchip? Daniels inquired. A young officer came forward holding a scanner and approached Max with caution. However, the moment he drew too near, Max retreated, his stance taut but not hostile. His eyes stayed sharp and watchful, as if to caution them against getting closer. This dog has received training, the young officer noted. He might be a former service dog. Daniels nodded and took a step forward, his actions deliberate and non-menacing. Easy now, boy, he said gently. Max observed him for a second before permitting the officer to attach a lead to his collar. Let's find out his origin, Daniels directed, motioning for his team to trail him. Max started to walk, his gait measured and unwavering, as if he knew his exact destination. The officers followed close behind, the flashing lights of their squad cars throwing long shadows on the street. They traveled through the city streets in silence, the suspense mounting with every block they traversed. Where is he leading us? One officer muttered quietly. At last, Max came to a halt before an old, run-down house in a desolate section of the city. The main door was slightly open, suggesting a hasty departure. Daniels frowned. This is it, he stated softly. The officers traded cautious looks before carefully nearing the entrance. The odor of mold, musty air, and spoiled food assaulted them as they crossed the threshold. Max guided them through a disordered living area and to a small door at the rear of the house. Remain vigilant, Daniels commanded, his voice low and tense. Upon opening the door, they discovered a faintly illuminated room. In a corner was an old, dust-covered crib. Surrounding it were scattered indications of recent habitation, an empty dog food bowl, a frayed blanket, and a handful of children's belongings scattered on the floor. Max slowly went to the crib and sniffed the area where the infant had laid. The baby was here, an officer whispered, his expression growing stern as he surveyed the scene. Exhausted, Max at last slumped to the floor beside the crib, his body relaxing as if he were letting himself rest for the first time. His task was accomplished. The officers proceeded with their search of the deserted house, the beams from their flashlights piercing through thick layers of dust in every corner. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath their boots with each careful step. Everything in the house indicated prolonged neglect. Chairs were tipped over, cupboards were bare, and the dining table was strewn with wrinkled documents. It seems whoever resided here departed hastily, one officer commented, leafing through the scattered papers on the table. Simultaneously, another officer was checking the kitchen. The sink was piled with unwashed dishes, and a subtle smell of decaying food permeated the air. On the counter, his eye was drawn to a crumpled envelope. He retrieved it, opened it, and discovered a letter written by hand. The penmanship was unsteady, as if composed under immense duress. "There's a letter here," he declared, and then started to read it out loud. "I don't possess the strength to look after him any longer. My world is crumbling around me. Max is all I have, and I trust he will do what is right. I can only hope for forgiveness someday." His voice faded as the last words hung in the quiet room. The letter was unsigned, but its meaning was agonizingly obvious. The writer had arrived at a state of complete hopelessness, confiding her child to her sole remaining companion, her loyal dog. Max was guarding the baby all this time. One officer murmured, looking over at the German shepherd resting by the crib. Max lay still, though his ears flickered slightly, ever vigilant of his environment. "We must locate the mother," Officer Daniels instructed resolutely. "We have sufficient evidence to believe she is in grave difficulty." The officers started questioning the few remaining neighbors in the vicinity. After a short while, they located an older gentleman who recalled the home's former resident. "I remember the young woman who lived here," the man stated, resting on his cane. "She was constantly accompanied by a large dog." "That must be him, correct?" he said, gesturing toward Max. "I believe she was experiencing difficult times. I saw her with a baby a couple of months ago, but then she simply vanished." The narrative was starting to make sense. The woman had been crushed by adversity and, in a moment of desperation, had put her faith in Max, the dog who had shielded her family until the very last. Guided by clues from the letter and the neighbor's testimony, the police expanded their search area. After a few hours, They got a report of a young woman roaming about in a state of exhaustion at a park nearby. When the team got there, they saw her seated immobile on a park bench, hugging herself for warmth. Her eyes were empty, her face haggard, and her hair disheveled. Officer Daniels approached with caution, adopting a grave yet unalarming tone. He selected his words with care. A child was brought to the hospital. A dog led us to an abandoned house nearby. Are you aware of this situation? We have to guarantee the child's well-being. At the mention of the child, the woman's eyes grew wide with shock and hope. Noah? Is that my son? Is he living? She faltered, her voice trembling as tears ran down her cheeks. She raised her hands to her mouth, her frame trembling with feeling. Daniels exchanged a look with his team, realizing they had located the right person. He gave a soft nod and offered reassurance. We found him. Noah is currently receiving treatment at the hospital. He is in stable condition but remains under observation. Rachel collapsed into tears. After days filled with despair, she finally heard a flicker of hope. Medical personnel promptly put her on a stretcher for a medical evaluation. As they traveled back to the hospital, Rachel started to share her story. Noah's father left us right after he was born, she explained, her voice raspy from anguish. I attempted to persevere, but my world disintegrated. Our food and money were depleted. I couldn't continue. Rachel paused, her gaze far away as she revisited the grim memories. Max, he was always there for us. He was always by my side and by Noah's. When my strength failed me, I instructed him to bring Noah to a place of safety. A hush fell over the ambulance as the officers and medical staff processed the weight of her statement. The notion of a dog leading a child to the hospital appeared unattainable, yet Max had accomplished just that. When the ambulance pulled up to the hospital, Rachel was led to the pediatric ward. Her heart throbbed as she neared the door. Despite his fatigue, Max got up and walked alongside her, his look unwavering and watchful. Inside the room, Rachel saw her son resting in a little bed, encircled by medical devices. His breathing was even, and his complexion was no longer deathly white. Her eyes welled with tears as she tenderly rested her hands on his tiny face. Noah, my baby, she whispered, her voice breaking with feeling. Max stood quietly in the doorway, surveying them with serene, attentive eyes. Rachel looked at him, overcome with thankfulness. Thank you, Max. You rescued my son. You rescued my family, she said quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. The doctors and officers stood silently, touched by the deeply emotional scene unfolding before them. Max was not just any dog. He was a protector, a quiet hero who had completed his task with unyielding loyalty and love. Rachel was permitted to remain at Noah's side as doctors continued to monitor his progress. After several hours, Noah began to exhibit definite signs of improvement. Though still frail, he started to react subtly to the familiar sound of his mother's voice. Rachel softly held his tiny hand, her eyes filled with love and hope. Max rested near the doorway, his body still tired but his ears attentive. The doctors and nurses who had observed the whole event could not conceal their respect for the faithful canine. One nurse smiled and gently stroked Max's head, whispering, "You are a true hero. Because of you, this little boy is alive." Max gave a slight wag of his tail, as if he comprehended the genuine praise. Rachel looked at Max with profound gratitude. "You saved us, Max. I will always remember your actions," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. After a few days of care, the doctors verified that Noah was no longer in critical condition and was making steady progress. With the devoted attention of the medical team, the boy was gradually recovering his strength. Meanwhile, hospital social workers intervened to help Rachel obtain temporary lodging and gain access to vital support services. The day Rachel was set to be discharged came on a clear, sunny morning. She held Noah in her arms, her expression displaying both weariness and fresh hope. As she walked out of the hospital doors, sunlight washed over her son's face. Noah opened his eyes wide with curiosity, looking at his mother before offering a small, sweet smile, the first such smile in many days. Max walked next to them, his stance stable yet vigilant, as if he still had a duty to keep them safe. Rachel paused, bent down to stroke Max's head, and whispered, "We made it, Max. Thanks to you, we have an opportunity for a fresh start." The story of their emotional ordeal had circulated throughout the local community. When Rachel got to her new residence, strangers appeared bearing small presents for Noah: clothes, food, and toys. Some even extended job offers to Rachel, anxious to assist her in rebuilding her life. The initial days in their new place were difficult, but with the help of benevolent neighbors and Max's steadfast loyalty, Rachel knew she didn't have to confront her challenges by herself anymore. She watched as Noah crawled on the floor, his vivid, animated eyes filled with curiosity. "We got through this, Max," she said softly, stroking the dog's head. Max gazed at her with his serene, knowing eyes, as if to confirm he understood. Max's tale was more than just one of miraculous survival. It served as a testament to a love and loyalty that knew no bounds. The emotional journey of Rachel, Noah, and Max concluded with a promising new chapter, but their story imparts a deeper lesson. It demonstrates how the power of loyalty, love, and sacrifice can irrevocably alter a family's destiny.